Some people lose everything but only wake up when they hit rock bottom. And what if I told you that while a man was risking his life defending the country, his own wife was sleeping with the commander who was supposed to protect him? Sounds like a TV drama, but it's real. This story isn't just about betrayal. It's about the coldness of someone who steals, lies, and still smiles, thinking they'll never be caught. But it's also about revenge, the kind that doesn't shout, but destroys in silence. And in the end, a kind of healing so powerful it'll make you rethink who really deserves to be by your side. Jack Sullivan wasn't just another soldier. He carried more than a flag on his chest. He carried purpose, a home built over 12 years of love, and the promise that he'd come back whole. Serving his country was never just about guns or territory. It was about honor, loyalty, commitment, things he thought Amanda understood too. But sometimes we find out too late that one person's commitment is just convenience for the other. While Jack faced the heat of the desert and the constant sound of explosions, Amanda lived in a quiet neighborhood with a manicured lawn and smiling neighbors at the gate. She told everyone she was a proud wife. She posted old photos of Jack in uniform, wore her wedding ring as a symbol of patriotism, and constantly said how much she missed her husband. But absence acts like a magnifying glass. And under it, what looked like love turned out to be loneliness in disguise. Or worse, pure convenience. Betrayal doesn't come out of nowhere. It's planted in vanity, watered by routine, and harvested at the first sign of opportunity. Amanda started changing her schedule, spending more time on her phone, isolating herself from Jack's family. Details that, when put together, paint the picture of emotional detachment most men ignore until it's too late. How many men do you know go to work every day trusting the person sleeping beside them? Most, until they find out that same bed is hiding secrets. Jack had no idea. His mind was focused on keeping his team alive and making it home in one piece. For him, Amanda was his reason. She was the one who kept him going through the danger. But the harshest truth in life is that not everyone who says I love you wants to see you win. And what breaks a man more than war is realizing he fought alone for something only he believed in. While he lived the hell of combat, she smiled at barbecues with neighbors, organized community events, and said she was taking it one day at a time. But deep down, Amanda was already living in another reality. The image of the faithful wife was just a curtain hiding a truth still in the making, one that involved not just betrayal, but theft, deceit, and a kind of revenge no one saw coming. And the cruelest part? Jack never imagined that while he was trying to survive bullets and landmines, the real danger was back home, wearing regular clothes, smiling like nothing was wrong, and planning a selfish comeback built on the pain of the one who trusted her the most. In every military unit, there's a hierarchy based not just on rank, but on trust. Richard Harlow, Jack's direct commander, was the kind of man who knew that. He had a firm stance, gave motivational speeches, and was respected by the soldiers. Jack looked up to him as a war mentor, a true leader. But what he didn't know was that behind the spotless uniform and confident look was someone willing to cross every line, including the ethical one. Richard met Amanda at one of those civic events organized for military spouses. One conversation was all it took for him to sense her vulnerability, and unfortunately, he saw it as an opportunity, not a boundary. Instead of guiding her, he got close. Instead of protecting her, he seduced her. It was the classic manipulation game disguised as empathy. The experienced man, the lonely woman, and a routine full of convenient excuses and strategic silences. The betrayal, in this case, was twofold. Because it wasn't just a marriage being destroyed. It was a code of honor being ripped apart by someone who was supposed to be a role model. Richard wasn't just a secret lover. He was the man assigning Jack's missions by day and sleeping with Amanda at night. It's hard to imagine a dirtier blow. A man who shakes your hand in the morning and kisses your wife at night carries more than cynicism. He carries poison. In the midst of all this, Amanda started living like there was no tomorrow. She began dressing differently, visiting expensive places and making small personal investments with money that wasn't hers. And the most twisted part? Many of those dates with Richard were funded by Jack's own money sent from the war zone. It was emotional, financial, and moral theft, and she didn't even bother to hide the excitement. The thrill outweighed the guilt. Stories like this make us rethink what trust really means. Because Jack relied on two pillars, his marriage and his chain of command. And both were collapsing from within, while he was fighting in another continent. The helplessness you feel when you realize the people who were supposed to protect you betrayed you. It's something no therapy or time can erase. It's an invisible scar that every man carries quietly, until one day it either explodes or heals. But fate has a subtle way of moving the pieces. And it was thanks to one small mistake, a moment of distraction from Amanda, that the truth began to surface. A message sent to the wrong person, at the worst possible time. Truth doesn't always arrive with a bang. Sometimes it shows up in a phone notification, a careless slip, a silence that lasts just a little too long. Jack was in Afghanistan, after a tough mission, trying to relax with the few minutes of internet access he had. When he opened his email, he wasn't expecting anything special. Maybe a promo, a bill, or a message from Amanda. But what he saw was something she never would have sent if she knew who'd be reading. "Do you still have the base shirt? We can use it tonight." That was it. Straightforward, intimate, and filthy. Jack froze. He read it 3 times, not understanding. That message wasn't meant for him. It was for another man, one who also wore a uniform but should have never touched another soldier's wife. And the worst part? She had used that symbol, the base shirt, mixing desire with dishonor. It was like betrayal dressed in the American flag. In the desert, with sweat dripping down his face and dust in his eyes, Jack felt something heavier than the heat, the weight of betrayal. The war outside was real, but the war inside had just begun. The image of the woman waiting for him at home was instantly replaced by a flood of questions. How long had this been going on? Who else knew? Did someone in his unit know and keep it quiet? It was a deep hole, one filled only with pain and rage. And when betrayal hits this hard, it doesn't just break your heart. It threatens everything you've built. Jack began to doubt his own judgment, his career, the years invested in that marriage. A betrayal like this doesn't just steal trust. It steals your identity, your emotional core, your sanity. And that's why so many men fall apart in silence. Because there's no battlefield crueler than realizing the person you'd die for would destroy you without blinking. But Jack wasn't the kind of man who reacted on impulse. He didn't lash out. He didn't respond to the message. He closed his laptop, took a deep breath, and stayed silent. Because sometimes silence is more powerful than any scream. And right then he made a decision. Revenge was coming. But it would be cold, calculated, and delivered in the most painful way possible, through the dignity of the one who betrayed him. He knew fate was already setting the scene. And like a good soldier, Jack just waited for the next order. But this time, the mission was personal. Days after the message that shattered his world, Jack was injured during a patrol. A piece of shrapnel pierced his calf during a nighttime clash, enough to pull him from the front lines. It was the kind of injury that required medical evacuation and rehab. And ironically, the person who signed off on his return to the United States was none other than Commander Richard Harlow, the same man sleeping with his wife. It was as if the traitor himself had unknowingly stamped the beginning of his own downfall. Jack didn't say a word. He received the release notice and confirmed the medical arrangements without flinching. Richard's name printed at the bottom of the document screamed off the page. He wasn't a superior anymore, he was a uniformed traitor. Jack held that paper like it was a trigger, and right there he made a new decision. This wouldn't end in confrontation. It would end in moral destruction. Revenge needed to be cold, smart, and final. The trip home was quiet. While other soldiers talked about reunions, barbecues, and cold beer, Jack thought about email passwords, GPS logs, cloud backups, bank transactions. He didn't just want a confrontation. He wanted proof. And more than that, he wanted to show, with undeniable evidence, the kind of betrayal that destroys more than a marriage. It shatters a person's dignity. That kind of revenge, when executed right, becomes a lesson, becomes justice, becomes liberation. When he landed in the U.S., he didn't run home to hug Amanda. He didn't tell anyone. He arrived in silence, called a trusted friend and simply said, "I need a new laptop, remote access, and time." He spent the first 48 hours in a hotel room, on crutches, digging through everything. Backed up messages, pulled up old records, cross-checked timestamps. What began as a suspicion became a dossier, a full map of the emotional and financial theft he endured while serving his country. And the most infuriating part? While Jack was cleaning blood off his leg, Amanda was cleaning out their joint account. Over $18,200 had been transferred to secondary accounts under the label of emergency expenses. But what he uncovered were hotel bookings, designer shopping sprees, and expensive dinners charged to the couple, enjoyed solely by Amanda and Richard. This wasn't just betrayal, it was theft of trust, of money, and of dignity. Jack realized he didn't need to raise his voice. He just needed to raise his evidence. And when you piece the puzzle together calmly, the impact is way bigger. Because when truth comes backed by dates, documents, and images, denial becomes impossible. When Jack finally walked into his house, he found Amanda alone, wearing a robe, with the place spotless, like nothing had happened. She flashed a wide smile when she saw him at the door, and that was the cruelest part. There was no regret in her eyes, just performance, as if she truly believed he'd come back blind, naive, ready to fall into the same trap again. But Jack wasn't the same man who left. The soldier had returned, but now with a different war in mind. She tried to hug him. He let her run down for a second, but stood still. The hug was cold. He simply said, "We'll talk later," and headed upstairs with his bag. In the silence of their bedroom, he opened drawers, checked closets, noticed a misplaced wedding ring and a new perfume that wasn't his. Every detail was a clue, and instead of yelling, he took mental notes. Jack knew that reacting emotionally gives away the upper hand, but when you observe, you build the counterattack. That same night, Amanda slept peacefully. Jack didn't. He spent hours on the computer, accessing shared accounts, retrieving old conversations, digging through backups. He found pictures, voice memos, emails, a full-blown web of betrayal that she built without even trying to hide it, like she thought she'd never get caught. And that's where most people stumble. They underestimate the silence of someone who's hit rock bottom, forgetting that's where the sharpest revenge plans are born. What was most shocking is that she didn't even bother to delete the evidence. There were explicit messages between her and Richard, lines laced with lust, mockery, and sarcasm. "He has no idea," said one. "We better enjoy it while he's still away," said another. Words that hit Jack's chest like shrapnel, because it's one thing to suspect betrayal. It's another to read it in text, with dates and timestamps, like they were celebrating. And as painful as it was, Jack felt that this was also the beginning of his healing. Because the worst part of betrayal isn't the fall, it's the doubt. But when you have certainty, when you see it with your own eyes, you can finally decide what to do with it. He wasn't just a betrayed man anymore. He was a man armed with truth. And that shift, though silent, was the start of his comeback. He just needed to stay quiet, a little longer. Because when someone truly wants justice, they don't explode. They gather, organize, and strike cold. Jack knew his moment to flip the game was near. And when it came, no one would be ready for the kind of payback he was about to unleash. In the following days, Jack stayed silent. Amanda thought he was still in shock from the war, and in a way, he was. But it wasn't from what he'd seen in the Middle East. It was from the Cold War now happening inside his own home. With every glance, every gesture from her, Jack saw a piece of a puzzle he already knew. And like a good soldier, he just observed, took notes, and waited. He knew that when the enemy feels safe, that's when they let their guard down. While she was out handling things at church or helping a friend, Jack took advantage of every second alone to search her computer, check her browser history, and cross-reference financial records. What he found was enough to burn any marriage to the ground. Dozens of receipts, compromising photos, and intimate conversations saved in the cloud. And most shockingly, a detailed spreadsheet of expenses, over $18,000 siphoned from their joint account. A true theft, calculated and cold. But what really knocked the ground from under Jack was an audio file buried in an old folder. It was Amanda laughing on the phone with Richard. She called Jack a great provider but terrible at reading signs, and ended with the line that lit the fuse. If everything goes right, we'll move out by the end of the year. In other words, she hadn't just betrayed him, she had used him as a stepping stone. The betrayal wasn't just physical, it was strategic, calculated, almost corporate. A plan to build her freedom on his suffering. And that's the point where a lot of people break down, when they realize that beyond the pain, there was planning. But Jack was cut from a different cloth. Instead of smashing things, he hit print. Instead of yelling, he saved it all to flash drives. He created folders by date, organized screenshots, saved GPS locations. Because he knew that good revenge doesn't need rage, just patience. And every piece of evidence was a spark waiting for the right moment to ignite. The hardest part wasn't finding the proof. It was continuing to pretend he didn't know. Amanda kept smiling, going about her routine, thinking she was in control. And Jack just smiled back. That kind of silent strength is what separates those who react from those who win. Because every betrayed man has two options: become a victim of pain or turn pain into a weapon. Jack chose the second. And while she slept peacefully, he built the dossier that would change everything. Because sometimes, it's not the scream that brings down the traitor's castle. It's the strategic silence, loaded with proof, that lights the fuse of truth. And that fuse was ready to explode. Jack knew that if he wanted real justice, he had to move outside the heat of emotion. And that's exactly what he did. He compiled all the documents, files, images, recordings, and built a dossier over 90 pages long. Every transaction, every screenshot, every detail was included as part of a puzzle that revealed not just marital betrayal, but the ethical and disciplinary involvement of a high-ranking U.S. Army officer. The evidence was so strong that silence would no longer be an option. He sent the material straight to the Military Inspector General's office using official and discreet channels. No threats, no drama, just facts. Alongside the report, he filed for divorce, citing infidelity, emotional abuse, and financial misconduct. The lawyer didn't even have to build a case. The evidence spoke for itself. In court, betrayal may not be a crime, but when it involves misappropriation of funds, broken trust, and institutional exposure, the explosion is inevitable. Richard was summoned to give statements in an internal investigation. At first, he tried to deny it, but just 2 voice recordings and a chain of emails were enough to bring the whole charade crashing down. The shame was public. Officers whispered in the hallways, and his once stellar reputation crumbled. He was suspended for improper conduct, lost access to strategic roles, and joined the list of those who fell by their own arrogance. Jack's revenge wasn't loud, but it was ruthless. Amanda, on her end, got hit from all sides. The divorce was ruled entirely in Jack's favor. She lost the house, was ordered to return part of the stolen funds, and watched her social standing collapse. What began as a game of manipulation and lust ended in public shame and emotional bankruptcy. And the most ironic part? There was no scandal needed. Jack didn't post anything, didn't spread gossip. He simply acted with precision and let the truth do the rest. This kind of revenge is rare. It doesn't involve shouting or public humiliation. It's the revenge of honor, of the one who suffered in silence but never forgot who he was. The one who was robbed, betrayed, and humiliated, but chose to respond with intelligence. And maybe that's why Jack's victory hurt his enemies even more, because it wasn't theatrical. It was final. There was no stage left for comebacks, no room for excuses, just the echo of what used to be called love. And while the 2 traitors tried to hide from their own choices, Jack finally started breathing freely. Not because of revenge itself, but because he had reclaimed control over his own story. And that, my friend, is worth more than any scream for payback. Jack didn't become a coach or some self-help preacher, but if there's one thing he learned, it's that a broken heart can be the start of a whole new rebuild, if you choose to get back up. After everything, he could have drowned in anger, guilt, or self-pity, but instead he chose the silence that heals over the screaming that only hurts. That doesn't mean it didn't hurt. It means he didn't let the pain write the final chapter. He rebuilt his life slowly. He stopped trying to understand what drove Amanda to cheat. because sometimes trying to find logic in pure selfishness is just a waste of time. Instead, he started investing in himself. He read books about purpose and resilience like Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. He started going to veterans groups and discovered that many men carry similar scars, just hidden under uniforms or behind quiet eyes. Little by little, Jack started laughing again. Not at old jokes, but at life's little ironies. Like the fact that while he once thought he needed her to be happy, what he really needed was peace. And peace doesn't live beside a liar. Peace lives next to truth. Today he looks back on everything like someone staring at the ashes of a fire. It was hot. It was terrifying. But it also burned away everything that no longer served him. He rebuilt friendships, saw his daughter more often, and started journaling his feelings. No filters, no shame. Because a broken heart doesn't need to be hidden, it needs to be understood. And that understanding doesn't come from outside. It comes from the conscious choice to turn every fall into fuel, every theft into strength, every betrayal into wisdom. And that's exactly why Jack no longer feels hate. He doesn't wish Amanda or Richard harm. Because when you've truly moved on, there's no room left for revenge. The revenge already happened. The moment you smile for real while they crumble in silence. And maybe that's the biggest win, proving that you can be betrayed, robbed, humiliated, and still rise with your head held high. Jack moved on without needing an audience, without needing to prove anything. And when someone asks him about that chapter of his life, he simply says, "It was the hardest war I've ever fought, but it was also where I learned that the greatest honor a man can have is to keep going, even when everything's trying to make him give up." Now tell me, how many truths have you been avoiding in your own house? How many times have you ignored the obvious signs thinking it was just in your head? Maybe you've never been to war like Jack, but haven't you already fought alone for someone who stabbed you in the back? The real lesson here isn't about revenge, it's about self-respect, about not staying silent in the face of emotional theft that too many pretend not to see. So tell me this, how much longer are you going to accept crumb when you deserve the whole feast? If this story hit you in any way, hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and come learn how to flip the script in your life.